All right, welcome everybody to the Amazing Trails virtual session. We're here to consider how the P2P trail corridor might become a national model for rural economic development over time. I think if you're on this call, you know that we are working on a regional master plan for the P2P trail corridor, and these discussions are a really important and early step in planning for the future of the corridor. So over the next hour, we will first, I will start with a presentation to make sure that everyone has context. We'll do a couple of polls and then we will get into discussion. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, you should be seeing my slideshow now. Don't worry, there aren't too many, but we do want to give you context again. This is the fourth out of 7 sessions. We do have a few left, one on Thursday and then a couple in early March. So if any of these other topics pique your interest, please consider joining us. And also, we will be to your part of the corridor sometime this spring. We are working to set spring meeting dates so that we can have some in-person discussions around the future of the corridor. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. Well, I want to make sure everyone understands the project area. We are looking at nearly 240 miles of trail between Parkersburg, West Virginia, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So this goes through 9 counties across a two-state area. The trail corridor is about 80% complete. And, everyone's working on the gaps right now, but it's 80% of the way. And these are the trails that we're talking about that together make up the P2P trail corridor. Mary Ellen referenced IHTC. The P2P is one of several corridors that make up the larger Industrial Heartland Trails Coalition. So that's just a little bit of geographic context for you. The reason we're gathered right now, again, is because we're working on a master plan. This is a regional master plan for the corridor made possible through an ARC Arise planning grant with local funds supplied by the Just Transition Fund, the Claude Worthington Bennington Foundation, and the City of Fairmont. So together, these funds make this project possible, and the partners that you see listed here are all actively involved in working on the project. This, of course, builds on past successes. I don't think I need to run down the list for this group, but I just have a few examples of past studies and reports and collaborations. We really truly are building on years and years of collaborative work to improve the state of trails in the communities that are alongside them. And the purpose of the master plan is to develop a community-based implementation plan that will unlock the community and economic development potential of the P2P corridor. That kind of sounds like a mouthful to me right now. But it's not really about building trails or addressing trail gaps. The various entities are working on that. It's about understanding how trails can do more for the region and for communities along the P2P. So truly, I'm so grateful that you're here for this discussion because this is one in which we are envisioning, what might that look like? What could that future look like? And how do we over time position the P2P as a national model? We're not there yet. It's something that we are hoping for over time. These are the goals of the master planning project. Part of it has to do with actual trail infrastructure and integrating trails and trail infrastructure with community economic strategies. So there's like the built component with the various amenities alongside the trail, how do trails connect into communities, etc. producing actionable recommendations for investment, for workforce development, marketing, and also managing success. I think you all recognize this is not an easy thing. To manage any sort of collaboration or collaborative effort over time, let alone something that spans a 240-mile two-state corridor. So, really planning for the future of this corridor is an important part of the planning process. We are looking to, and when I say we, I mean the partners. They've set out from the start to lead equitable community engagement that ensures that historically underserved communities shape and benefit from the outcomes. Community engagement is, like I said, it's an early part of this work, and it will be an ongoing part of this work. And it's one of the most important things that we're going to do with this project. And finally, getting back to the P2P as a national model, how do we really position the corridor for recreation-based economic development? This is another look at those goals, as well as the objectives or focus areas that we have in front of us and are helping to lead this project, and in the project values that we hold dear. Those values are respect and dignity for anyone who engages in the process, no matter what they think about trails or how often they use them. That's highly important to us. Centering communities in this work, acceptance of not knowing. And what I mean by that is that we don't know all of the answers. We are working to get to them. We are committed to having a community of learners gathering together over the next many months so that we can figure out what will work best for this region. And that gets me to regional collaboration. This work doesn't happen without regional collaboration. These are just the components of the project itself. These are some of the things that our team is working on. Community engagement, as I mentioned, looking closely at the infrastructure, assets, and downtown connectivity. How well do the various trails connect into town, or how could they? Frank, who introduced himself, is on our team, and he has biked the entire corridor. Go Frank! And that between November and February. But he was out assessing the corridor using an app that Pennsylvania Environmental Council has provided to us, so that we can really assess and inventory the corridor. We also are working on developing a market understanding of the trail corridor. We're doing a market analysis and an economic analysis so we can understand, what's already occurring, what's the potential, and then out of that we will develop an economic development strategy and also a branding and a marketing strategy. Last thing is implementation. This is where we're thinking about things like governance and how do you keep this work going over time? What's the investment strategy? How do we fundraise for such an enormous project? And again, how do we make it work? So these are the things we're thinking about. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the engagement we're doing this month, but do we have any clarifying questions before I plow ahead? Just come off of mute if you have a question or a comment. I'd be happy to address it.
Amy, I have
Okay.
a question. So you kind of started this conversation saying we want to create a national model for this type of work, right? Did I hear that? Was that one of the
That
bullets?
yeah, Adam, that's one of them. Hmm.
So I guess my question is like, I understand we want to do this right, but like doing it so well that it becomes a national model, that's just sort of an interesting goal. Like,
Hmm.
did, can you unpack that one just a little bit before we move on, if it's okay?
That's a really good question. And I'm wondering, I'm wondering if I'm the right person to answer it or not, because this is a goal that I received. But so I'm going to ask our partners, jump in if you'd like. But I mean, really, my take on it is that this group wants to do leading work. And by the way, there are other really great examples out there in other regions. So like we also will be modeling some of what we've seen and finding ways to make it right for this region. But what makes it why is the national model part important? I think it's about just trying to make sure that it's quality community and economic development that makes a lasting difference for the region. But Chris, I see you came off mute. What's your take?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Going back to like some of the conversations that really like framed up this project, I think it was really more related to the slide that you shared with Kent's quote on it, where we kind of are, I think, are past this like, hey, if we build it, they'll come, and that's the end of the story component, and really thinking more about the like how can we do everything possible to, make sure that the trails, recreation, transportation, community development aspects are all kind of like melded together at the onset of this project? And how can we maybe not standardize, but at least, document, record the process that we've used to really like activate what's already in place and kind of maybe like elevate the other aspects that need to be developed a little further. And I think, since this project is multi-state, it involves kind of a nice cast of partners. Um, for me, like it's what will we learn through this process that we can share with the broader, trails community, right? And Mary Ellen, I see you're on this call too. Maybe you have some interesting takes on this one, but how do we make sure that the lessons we learn doing these planning efforts aren't just localized? How do they inform the work that our like national landscape of partners are doing? It's kind of a little bit nebulous, but worth undertaking.
Mary Ellen, you're making some classic faces there.
I'm admittedly multitasking a little bit.
Okay.
Starters, watching a lot of hockey the last few weeks, I realize I myself have a little bit of a Quinn Hughes maybe seeing ghosts face. But yeah, I think I am really curious to see. I've not been involved in P2P directly. I know a lot of people on this call, but that's kind of the extent of it. And I wanted to join so I could think through some of what Chris just flagged of like what's the really stellar work that is happening here that we can highlight RTC's national organization. So we're kind of always a huge part of my job is just kind of cultivating those stories so that we can do that. Um, so
Yeah, great. Thank you.
people's good stories.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, this is we're planning right now. So it's planning for and trying to do the work well as we're planning, but we're planning for that prosperous future. And we don't know what path this will all take. We don't know what the solutions will be regionally. But that's why we're gathered here. But Adam, if I know you well enough to know there's probably a really smart thought or question behind your question. So, if you want to elaborate a bit more,
No, no,
please.
not at all. There isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Okay.
just, for some reason, that was just popping into my mind, like, oh, that's an interesting goal. And you asked for questions. There's a little bit of
Yeah.
silence, and I was like, well, why don't I ask it? What's the harm?
Yeah.
And
Super.
all those responses answer it. So I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Let me show you just a few more things and we'll just get into more discussion. You may have seen by now that we are treating the entire month of February as Heart Trails Month. It's a month-long celebration of the various trails along the P2P. And the idea is to generate interest and enthusiasm and to kick us off in a really loving and engaging manner as we work toward this larger project. So this is just to give you an idea for what we've been up to. We've been doing these love letters to trails, which is a web form that you can do in 5 minutes. And we've been having fun receiving and reading people's love letters to their trails and putting some of them out on social media. So wanted to call that out to you. These are just some of just a handful of pictures from some of our events so far. Ella did such a bang up job of doing lino cut Valentines. I see Peggy Pings is on the call. Peggy participated in making Valentines and doing these fused glass trees that went from Morgantown to Charleston and were on display at the state capitol, again, just to advocate for and show love for trails. We did a really great film screening in Fayette County last weekend, and we've been getting people of all ages to, tell us whether it's on a Valentine or a web form or on a, whiteboard, what it is that they care about and why they appreciate trails. Funny thing is, the kids who have participated gave us really thoughtful, detailed answers. The adults are giving good answers too, but the kids win so far. Ways to get involved. You can follow us on social media. You can follow the newsletter to get the most frequent updates, most useful updates. You could send your love letter. You can attend or host an event, and there's still time for that. So if you have something going on in your area, get it on our events calendar. I'm going to stop my share here. And before we have any further discussion, I'd like to have you complete a couple of polls. So the first poll has to do with your hopes for trails. What do you most hope for when it comes to trails? And I'm going to force you into an answer. You can only select one. I see 5 out of 8 of you have responded. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds.
Amy, do you want our personal or professional hats on for this? Both
Personal.
answers can be different.
Personal, you as a whole human.
Oh, God. Just me as a whole human thing.
Last few seconds if you're still working on it. Okay. We're going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results. Are you all seeing the results? Top response is a place to recreate and socialize. These are different every meeting that we have. I love that. But these are going to all of our meetings. So we'll see where we end up over time. I'm going to stop my share here. Keep that in mind, a place to recreate and socialize. That's top selection. Second poll is more about how do we get there? There we go. That's how I get out of that poll. How do we get to that envisioned future? Again, you only get to choose one. Okay, we've heard from 6 people, 7 people. Oh, 8. Whoa. All right. So here's where we landed. Two options here: engaging and involving local people and businesses, and improving trail-related infrastructure and amenities and connections into town. Very good. Thank you all for taking the time to respond to that. I am Yeah, I'm thinking those two answers are pretty consistent with what we've heard so far in other places. Does anyone want to react to either of these polls? And again, feel free to just come off of mute, share your camera if you're able to, and it's time to talk. Mhm. maybe there's not much to say about that. So let's just go straight to the description of today's gathering. I'm thinking about the detailed description where we said, we want to position the P2P as a national model for rural economic development. Um, what does that mean to you? Why is that important to you? Let's go ahead and get started.
So I'm Ella. I'm with the Mon River Trails Conservancy, kind of hubbed out of Morgantown, West Virginia. Um, and I've been in that world that Kent has talked about of having trails built that don't have the wishes that we want to immediately see once a trail is constructed, like all the amenities and all of the communities thriving around it, engaged with it. And one of the things that when you said rural development, I think that that's a key component to this is a lot of a lot of all of our trail is very rural and very small community. And one of the struggles that we faced is broadband issues. And um, I think one of the things I was thinking about as part of the stories and part of maybe the lessons is that we have watched the trail that is a big part of this in West Virginia, the North Bend Rail Trail, which is 72 miles, has been torn up numerous times over the years and still by broadband development. That we're trying to bring broadband to these communities. And that's a key part of having workforce development and job recruitment and, like all of the things that we're also trying to do. And I think one thought I had over the last few days is how to try to see if we can weave that story into that trail, because if it truly does become the driver for bringing broadband to, 4 counties, 5 counties that are along it, like that's an amazing feat for West Virginia. And that should be like maybe even a tagline for it, because
Mhm.
it has, because of this effort, it hasn't functioned well as a trail in my mind. Like there are a lot of issues with North Bend, but one of the reasons I think it's struggled is because it continually becomes this corridor for something else. And and so I just want to kind of bring that out as an idea of as we are trying to lift up these communities and not just around trails, but around all of the things that can also help it help those communities thrive, right? And so yeah, so that just wanted to kind of mention my thoughts on that lately.
Thanks, Ella. Yeah, I mean, and for those of us that were at the West Virginia Outdoor Economy Summit, I mean, broadband was hot topic, right? I mean, it's I, we're talking about um, I mean, the reason we work in trails has to do with quality of life. I think a lot of us and the lack of broadband or the existence of contributes in a really important way to quality of life and economic opportunities. So thank you for bringing that up and reminding us that it can be a part of the story that we tell. What else? The question was what why is this topic important to you? Why are you thinking how are you thinking about rural economic development and how these trails can play a role? Those were two questions, really, so I'm giving you options.
Amy, would you be up to put them in the chat as well while we ponder?
The questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. Why is rural economic development important to you? There's one.
Sometimes my mental train of thought
Yeah,
is
yeah,
non-linear.
yeah, you bet. Hmm. I mean, I think that the big question is what brought you here? Why are you spending your 4 o'clock hour with us? Um, please go ahead, jump in.
Am I allowed to say because you sent an email?
Yeah, yeah. And what else, Frank? What are your thoughts on this topic?
No, I think, the opportunity that comes from trails for me is personal. And so I think that if I want to see the change in the world in the through the lens that I want of like I want to see thriving communities, I want to have people out on the trails, the social sphere that comes with trails, it's only going to happen if people embrace it. And one of the ways to embrace it is through you know, feeling a sense of place in these communities. And we've seen that replicated in other, all along the gap, in a place like Franklin, Pennsylvania. And Ella, to your credit, Morgantown. I don't you always poo-poo what's going on there, but I was very impressed with what I saw in Morgantown. Um, but even in a place like Salem, West Virginia, which is on the North Bend, and North Bend has its challenges, but the 3 miles that's in the town limits is definitely the center of something that's happening in that town. So how do we replicate that? And, how do we inspire people through seeing that? That's why I'm on the call.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Ella is, I will rephrase your your comment as always calling us forth to, is always wanting more for Morgantown and surrounding communities. Um,
Well, I also think that it's a challenge to, like this is the economic component is not something I get. I don't have that expertise. I don't have that understanding. I will never be one that is going to be starting a business. And yet I'm trying to cheerlead all of these other folks to do that. And, and a part of the summit was recognizing how many challenges there is to doing that. If you have that as a passion, it's certainly easier to do that in some other areas other than rural communities, right? And and so I think that it's interesting, like we all talked about building the infrastructure, or a lot of the answer was around building the trail infrastructure and amenities, and that's I think I've said it before, but it's like that's something I understand. Like, oh, I think, oh, if I can make it easier for people to get to those businesses, or if I make it easier for people to connect to, different amenities, then that's something I have more control over than being able to provide capital, right? Or being able to and do workforce training or whatever it is that would spark somebody to say, "Hey, I can make a go of this." And so I listen to trail users. Like that's their wish is like, oh, let's be able to get easier connection to our farmers market or to our other things. So I just, I guess, trying to circle back it to like how do you want the thriving communities to function and what is their needs? I'm not sure of the answer. It's just that I think that one component is an easier goal that I have more control over.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
I think I had an idea and then I may have lost it, but in this conversation that it's from like the trail, developer supporter perspective is one angle, but if Mike's still on, I wonder if we could maybe get some insight from like the business perspective. I could see some of this that, really supports, it's kind of like a peer support network, right? Like riders on the gap, they're there for the trail, but what makes the experience is really like the other spots, the amenities, the places to go, the eats along the way. And if you don't have that stuff, then I think the overall economic ecosystem related to the trail kind of suffers, right? So it's
Yeah, I mean, again, somewhat of a novice here, but yeah, I definitely do bring guess more of a commercial approach to this and a little bit of to get into buying the business. I studied it pretty long and hard to see what makes it go, and is this something I want to be involved in? And one thing I heard loud and clear is that if along the way there's enough of a place for decent food, a decent bed, coffee, beer, and ice cream, you're set. So um and I'm sure that's not new to any of you, but that's one of the things that makes the Gap, of course, so amazing, right? They luckily have these towns spaced, for different types of traveling. I mean, we as Golden Triangle, we send a ton of people, thousand some people down the trail a year, and they're sort of raining cash as they travel down the trail, right? Dropping stuff here and there through either passing through us or out of their own pocket as they get to each place along the way. And yeah, it's yeah, and what makes it nice, of course, is that we can send people down on a 3 day. If they are bombing the trail, we can send people on 5 days and everything in between because there's enough amenities along the way that make it possible. And for me, participating in this, again, being new, I'm trying to make some connections, but I very much see what's possible. Sorry, we're trying to, trying to help connect all these trails and bring a little bit of that, sort of if we can help you get it built, we can feed it. And because we have a huge network. I mean, we've sent over the years, long before me, there's probably 20 some thousand people that have come down the trail. And our average customer, for instance, is probably a 65-year-old person from the West Coast, and they fly in and they do 4 day to, if they include the C&O, it might be 7 days or so down, down to DC. Um, and these are folks spending thousands of dollars per trip to come in and do this. And seeing what's possible. We have this sort of north to south, gap to C&O. But if we can get this thing done and connect it, to what you're working on, if we can connect it up through like Armstrong County in Pennsylvania and get it run up to the north, if eventually it can connect to Erie a little further, further out on that. But what's possible here is dramatic. I mean, you could have people going in so many different directions on interconnected trails. There could be hundreds and hundreds of miles here of things that are possible, and that's certainly exciting to me. I'm starting to get to know people that have some notable, sizable interest in what's possible along the trail and are investing in some areas here and there. And actually, key to you all, there's some good things happening in Connellsville that can really kind of anchor that end of the trail. And there's some folks there that there's some promise in what they might be able to bring because of what they're already starting to do and see. So yeah, I see good things. So.
Thank you so much, Mike. I mean, we're getting into that space about talking about like the real potential for this corridor, I'm hearing some of the things that are necessary to get us there over time have to do with having the right kinds of amenities, having an aspirational route that is possible for the people that want to go for the long haul. And I think, Chris, it was you that spoke to the importance of sense of place. We have to feel that we're someplace that is engaging us. And I'm not just talking about outside visitors. So these are some of the things that I'm sort of grabbing onto. Adam, I saw you came on camera a little while ago. Was there something that you wanted to contribute?
No, just taking notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, super. So who else wants to jump in? Bill.
Yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing I think about in terms of the P2P being a national model. Um, so I don't do trail stuff as a job. I wish I did, but I'm a software engineer by trade. And, you know, every software project is not, you don't build everything from scratch. Like me as a software engineer, I have the same problems that everybody else has. The problems that are unique to my situation are very small. So what I do in my work is I go out and I build and I grab pre-built libraries or modules of code that I kind of piece together and put code in between that glues them together. And so the point I'm getting at is it's I always say that the problems that we have in my town are very similar to the problems in the next town. And if there are, modules that a town that's just getting off the ground in terms of its trail journey, if they can quickly, in an encyclopedic way, see what someone else has done, in a place that is similar to them, so for us in Uniontown, Connellsville would be a good example because they're 10 miles away, whereas Pittsburgh might not be. Even though we can glean some things from what Pittsburgh does, we're more similar to Connellsville. So if there's an easy way for, especially to for trail advocates, but more specifically like city leaders that are really don't have the time to deep dive into all this stuff, if you can just give them, kind of a pre-built recipe for how you could do something and maybe tweak it a little bit for your individual, needs, but just kind of a pre-built module or playbook of how to do things. That's how I think, P2P could maybe be a national model of sorts.
Mm. I love that. Thanks, Bill. That's a really good analogy.
Good answer, Bill.
Uh, and it wasn't your central point, but also, if we're talking about what are the things that need to happen, I'm hearing municipal involvement, right? We need local governments and local people involved and engaged and working toward this.
Yep, definitely.
I would just add to the local electeds and leaders that they're really deeply rooted regional folks too. That can happen at a variety of scales, but there's a lot of instances, especially with the trails long as this one, that like things can stop at the town line, and having that regional perspective that Ella and Amy and Frank and Chris and so many other people bring, to think past the city limit or the town or village limit, to think about that connection in a more regional way is really valuable as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you, Mary Ellen.
One thing I'll throw out there is, we often in these conversations we think about county lines and town limits and things on that nature. The users are completely agnostic to that. And so one of the big roles we can play in this conversation is making sure the handoff from one to the next is seamless, while not doing away completely with what makes a place unique. And I think that's one of the opportunities in any of these projects as we're looking at them as economic development is a lot of when we're talking to political leaders, they're often thinking about how do I attract the next, employer that's a big warehouse or something. And this is a natural resource that can't be extracted. It can only be shown off. that we create the places that really showcase what's beautiful about the place, what allows people to move through and experience these communities we like. And so we have to keep that in mind. It's, change, it is an economic development thing. It is a natural resource that they can exploit by really, trumpeting how special it is to have these places. So.
Ella?
Yeah, that just made me think about I think it's important that we eventually, not necessarily at this point, but eventually be really thinking about the branding and the marketing of our corridor. And I it made me think I would love every trail along it to say we're the gateway, right? That they're proud enough to say I'm the gateway to this. And when you have a corridor that seems to have like a stop and start point, I think that's a little harder to convince the local leaders that they are that. But or it's we're the hub, or we're the start of adventure, or and so I want kind of like this feeling like every community has those connections. And yeah, it is still a challenge to combine all of these trails that have their own histories and identities around their name, or around their past, and still continue that. Um, but I also think that as much as it is difficult to get trail, or like the municipalities or counties to think beyond, to think regionally, or to think beyond their boundaries, um, it's important for them to recognize how important it is to collaborate the next town or county over. Like, I'm constantly going to say, oh, hey, you can get ice cream in Pennsylvania, only, 5 miles away, or you can get kayak shuttle or rental at this place 12 miles away. So not every town is going to have the same infrastructure or ability to do those kind of things. And I don't think we want them to necessarily duplicate the same things in every town, right? We want um, there to be some variety so that we can have an easy way to push them down, a trail user down the track to get to one more exciting thing. Um, but whether or not you can ever convince a county commissioner of that, this has been a challenge, I think. Um, so anyway, I think that's another component, is that level of collaboration that needs to happen to some level, even if it's just cheerleading for another county or community to make a step forward on something. And part of what we've been trying to do, and it's certainly easier in other places, in some places than others, but the idea of getting levies passed so that there is trail maintenance funding, and kind of that level of community engagement through the voter. Like, you got to convince county commissioners of that. So I think that's another, like, it leads you into all different directions when you're talking about this big corridor.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that we haven't been working from the right toolbox, or we've had only a handful of tools in the toolbox, like like you just mentioned levies, for example, right? I think a part of what we're looking for are like regional strategies, investment strategies, um, how to sustain this work over time, like, and to me that takes me to other places that are doing some really interesting things, like in Western North Carolina, Made by Mountains, for example. Um, and I'm blanking on other examples right now, but I I don't know. I think of a large part of this work is identifying regional strategies to carry this work forward and help communities along the way. Thoughts on that? Again, Mary Ellen, if I was in the chat, I would be asking about, tools in the toolbox. What do we have? What don't we have? What do we need to be thinking about? Oh, Erica, thank you for your comment in the chat. Appreciate that you're here to learn and that you're sharing some of your ideas. Thank you. Thank you for sharing also. Bridgeway Capital's attempt at regional branding. This is Acre. Acre is I'm blanking on can you help me with the acronym here?
Yeah, you better get it right for the symposium.
I know.
It stands for Alliance for Creative Rural Economies. So that's what brings us into this space. Is a lot of these themes, but not on necessarily outdoor recreation economy, but on creative economy in these small towns, right? And supporting those small businesses as a catalyst for revitalization. But what we've learned in our work is that, and this is actually to Mike's point, is that these I guess you'd call them recreational cultural tourists navigate through these communities for a lot of different reasons. And while we were happy to focus on the creative economy, there's other dimensions to it that we weren't paying as much attention to as we should. So that's why we're plugging into this to explore other aspects of economic rural revitalization outside of the creative economy work. But this website is example of small businesses in smaller communities being elevated at a national level along with the communities they are in, right? As part of a collective of communities. We call them an ecosystem of ecosystems, right? And I know that's the worst, but it is what it is. But we got a lot of these precedents from an organization called the Urban Manufacturing Alliance, which started talking about local branding initiatives like Made in San Francisco or Made in Philly, Made in Baltimore. And we've kind of spun it up for more of a decentralized approach to rural areas.
Yeah. Yeah. Super. Thank you, Adam. I want to also inject into the conversation something along the lines of Erica's comment, which in part has to do with local communities, local residents, local youth. Like when I think about what does it take for this corridor to one day become a national model, like I have like one eye on rural economic development and providing this seamless and special visitor experience, and another eye on ensuring that we have this primary audience of local and regional residents that use and appreciate the trail and benefit from it. So when I think about national model, like that has to be a part of it, right? So um and I didn't have a chance to read your entire comment, Erica, but I think we might be a bit in the same space. And the conservation piece is also, it's one of the focus areas of this project. Our last session was on trails and conservation. So we think you can't be a leader in the outdoor economy if you are not like really paying attention to conservation. And just want to put that out there as well. Other thoughts? Whether it's, you coming off of mute or putting ideas in the chat, what do you want to make sure we're thinking about as we move forward? Ella, you unmuted. Go ahead.
Well, I just would love to see the more tools in the toolbox, but also more skilled people with the for those tools. Like you can give me a well-stocked toolbox, but if I don't know how to, swing the hatchet, it's not going to do much good. So,
Okay, yeah, important point, right? We
if we're going to use
capacity.
metaphors here or whatever.
Yeah. We've had a lot of good metaphors. Capacity, though, we need to be thinking
Yes,
about and
building that
building
capacity.
capacity. And I mean, this is a great chat item. I mean, what tools are out there that maybe we're not aware of? Like what strategies, what ideas are you aware of from other places? I know I just like am peppering you with questions, but um, we're collecting ideas right now. So we have about 5 minutes left. I recognize you may or may not be in the chat. I'm going to ask you, Chris, thank you so much for the Towns and Trails Toolkit. Appreciate that. Um, I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions for these kinds of discussions, which is how could we fail miserably at this work? What do we want to avoid over the next 6 to 9 months?
I think another question is how do we see success? Um, like um, how are we gauging that? And if I saw a few more businesses in some of those towns, I would be just so thrilled, and thriving. But I also think that that takes a lot of um, you know commitment on both sides, commitments of the businesses, and they might not have that longevity for many reasons. I watch people in Morgantown restaurants especially come and go quickly, and they might not go because of the usual economic components, but just because their family needs to move to another town or whatever, but I also feel like there's a pact that needs to be happening between land managers and those trail managers to keep those keep the trail in good shape, keep it in and open and available to the public in order for those businesses that may not be completely, I would hope not completely surviving based on trail user, um, but but certainly, that might be the lift that they need to keep going. And so, yeah, I can't remember exactly where we were going with this, except for the fact that I want to make sure that like we are figuring out ways to measure the success, and maybe we each would have a different answer for that.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the measures that I heard you put out there was small business development, entrepreneurship, businesses that can be sustained over time. So I'm hearing you say those things. Chris, thanks for your comment. A way of failing miserably is assuming that we understand the barriers that rural communities face to becoming trail towns. And your comment is getting upvoted. I'm seeing some votes there. So that's a good one. So listen, it's 4:58. I want to thank you for your time and for this discussion, for your all of your comments, for all of your chat contributions, and for spending this hour with us. We really are near the beginning of understanding what's possible for this region, and I'm so grateful to you. So please come back. See us again at one of the other sessions, and we'll also be sure to let you know when we're in your part of the corridor this spring. And reach out to me if you want to talk one-on-one about any of this. Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it, folks. See ya.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night.